Only one regional qualifier, however, Jeffrey de Graaf, of Sweden, mind you, remains, but there were some really strong performances from the Asian players this year. So what did you make of Goto and Leung's run? And what other international qualifiers caught your eye this year?
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned Jeffrey de Graaf having moved to Sweden. Last in the World Championships 5 years ago, representing the Netherlands, needed to win his match to save his tour card, but in the end fell, and now back, well, not back on tour yet, but playing well enough. Just true, really good performance coming from 2 sets down against Richie Edhouse, and then that match that we mentioned earlier against Jose de Sousa. So, I mean, as far as Jeffrey de Graaf, really impressive. And in case any of our listeners are saying, well, I'm looking at the list, there's more than just one left. The international qualifiers list also includes the tour card holder qualifiers, Challenge Tour, Development Tour, and 4 of those players are still in. But we obviously know that those players are good enough to compete at the PDC level because, well, the tour card holder qualifiers are tour card holders. The Development and Challenge Tour will be next year. So we wanted to just talk about those international qualifiers. I'll start with the 2 that you mentioned there from the Asian qualifiers, both of whom won their first round match before going out in the second round. Man Lok Leung, first, Jean Van Veen didn't show up. And I mean, there are some questions about where Van Veen's game is right now. The last couple months, he's a bit of significant regression. He looked like the next winner on tour. And he's struggled in the last month and a half or so, really struggled against Leung. But even if he was playing at his best, Leung was fighting tooth and nail with him in that and averaged well into the 90s. And in the last few sets, looked the better player. And that's why he won. And really the only thing that did him in against Gabriel Clemens was experience. Clemens knew how to lift his game in the key moments in that match. And that's why he took that second set in a last leg decider, and he just was able to come back after Leung won that third set to 0 and not be fazed by it. Experience got Gabriel Clemens over the line, but Leung looks like a player who is every bit a future Pro Tour player if he decides to go over to Q School and give it a go. Really 2 impressive matches from him. As far as the Japanese player, Tomoya Goto, that first match against Ian White, let me first say, not safe quite yet. Could potentially drop off the tour if a couple things go against him. He'll need 2 players to jump him. Luke Littler, obviously, but the semifinal could do it. Quarterfinal needed for Richard Veenstra. But Ian White didn't play poorly. But Law just didn't. He could not figure out how to hit those darts to win those first 2 sets. Came back, but then Goto just kept on trucking along, and a very solid 90 average. And yes, his average dropped in the second round against Ryan Searle, but that it didn't drop by as much as it might look like because he was averaging in the mid-70s in that first set. He was, awful in the first set, but the rest of that match, he was pretty darn even, missing multiple darts of 3 in hand to win the second set. Did miss some darts to win the third set as well, but finally closed it out. And then Searle just hit the right shots in that fourth set. It was not a 3-0 set. It might have been on the on the actual scorecard, but it was a closer set than that. Goto playing more close to that 90 average that he had in the first round once you take out just how poor that first set was. Really, again, impressive. And the bottle that he showed, even though he missed some of those darts to win that second set, the bottle he showed in both matches to be able to calm himself after a bad dart and come back, or after a bad turn, to come back and throw in a 180 or throw in a ton plus finish, just really, really impressed me. I think he's a player that I don't think we saw the best of. I don't think we saw the best of Leung either. But just for a couple of other players, David Darren Penhall of Australia, really impressive in that first round against Jules Van Dongen. Van Dongen, as I said a few times recently, has regressed over the last few months after he looked top 10 in the world in much of the summer. Played fairly well, but Penhall played the best we've seen from him, including his time on tour. And I'll mention Alex Spellman. I mentioned him earlier. A really, really good performance. He's a player that I think is the most talented player in the CDC. Yes, he's 0-5 against Stowe Bunce this year, but had a higher average in all 5 matches. He has a very, very good game, and I think he's more consistent than the commentators gave him credit for. There was no chance against Ryan Joyce because Ryan Joyce was unbeatable. And finally, Pablo Nebrita missed some darts that could have beaten Simon Whitlock, but a very strong performance, fighting back every time Whitlock looked like he had the upper hand in that match. Didn't win, but a match that he absolutely could have and probably is going to feel like should have won.
Yeah. In terms of, not much to disagree with, but in terms of Leung and his game, I think that one, even though Gian didn't bring everything to that, I did think that was quite intriguing. Obviously, it was quite the battle for him to take the first set, and it's quite the battle for him to take the second set. They went right down to the wire. So I didn't think that he was going to necessarily run away with it, as it were. But it's really hard in the set play when you have 2 full sets for somebody to make it back without you, especially when you're going all the way, to make it back without, putting in a real hard yard. So that one was super impressive, and I think that is worth noting. Tomoya Goda, again, did a great job in Diamond White, was performing decently, not at the highest part of his game, but just couldn't stitch it together. And again, not nearly as close as the other match, but I really thought that John, with that 2-0 lead, would manage to creep over the line. So I was quite impressed with how Leung held it together and proceeded with his game. Other people, you've taken Alex Spellman. Alex Spellman was fantastic. It wasn't a shock, but I really think that the 3-1 scoreline doesn't paint the picture. I was there watching, and just at that point in time, of all the sessions that I had been to, it was the highest scoring session, and was so exciting to see a first round match that was getting these large averages and getting proper big checkouts, and was so exciting to be there. And I really did think that in the end, Alex Spellman was going to come out at least 3-2, possibly even on top. And I'll also mention, even though he got whitewashed, so it seems kind of a weird thing to mention, Ben Robb is someone who I thought, Veenstra's got a long history. He was favorites for the WTF, was it the BDO? One of those two. He was a favorite to win that. He's been playing a lot. Again, you deal with the fact that he has less distance to travel. And then, crowds and things. The people in the crowd love a Dutch player if there's not going to be an English player around. And there was not much. They both didn't perform to their highest standard, but there wasn't much in it. And there was such a gap in the averages that I'm still stunned, I think, that he didn't manage to get a set on the board. I really thought that he was going to push it all the way and probably overcome. And so when it closed out 3-0. I was actually so stunned that they asked me if I wanted to be in on Veenstra's press scrub, but I said I legitimately don't have any questions for him. I was just that level of engaged and kind of shocked that there was no back and forth to it really on paper. And the other one I want to mention, even though he did not bring his A game, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's a first. And hopefully it won't be the last, and hopefully we'll see more and more, because the more places that darts goes, the better it is for darts. And that, of course, is to be treacle. Winning over Mario van den Bohara, who did not bring his A game either. And sincerely would have thought that he would have gotten his tour card. So he wasn't the first Frenchman to get a PDC tour card, even though he did try his hand at Q School a bit. But then to be the first French person to win on the World Championship stage is notable. And if he can get whatever nerves out, or just for the sheer fact of having experienced it now and knowing what to make of it, hopefully we will see him back again. Hopefully he'll get his tour card, and if he doesn't get his tour card, hopefully he'll come through and qualify again, and we'll see more of him on that World Championship stage. Because again, every new country where we get a winner that gets through is just fantastic for darts. And he's definitely got a much higher average in his game than what he brought. He can make it out of the 80s easy. So congrats to him for making it through, and hopefully we will see more of France going forward.